Within the span of a year, two men who did not know each other would disappear from virtually the exact same area under virtually the exact same circumstances. Hello, true crimerers. This is the mysterious case of Tom Young and Keith Reinhard. Viewer discretion is advised. This story takes us to the really tiny town, and I mean tiny town, of Silver Plume, which is located in Clear Creek County, Colorado. Say that 3 times fast. It was first established by settlers who were trying to get rich with the whole gold thing, and they were trying their luck to strike gold there, but they did not really ever have much success with it. All they ever found was what they would describe as these little clumps of gray ore. What they didn't realize at the time was that this was actually silver ore, something that still had value. But this town, it never really took off. It never became really anything bigger than what it already was. In 1987, this town had just a minuscule population of around 150 to maybe 200 people tops. This is a town that had like its own little museum. It had these little tiny like mom and pop type shops, antique stores. They had, of course, a little church there. It was just this is obviously a community where everyone is literally going to know everyone. It's basically impossible to not know everyone who lives in Silver Plume. And when you see the photos of it, I mean, we're not getting here. This is a small little town. You could probably be at either end and talk to your neighbor and still hear each other. I don't have a lot of background information, unfortunately, on Tom Young. I know he was born around 1940. He was a veteran of the Army Special Forces. Eventually, he would become a high school teacher at Arvada High School, and then he would retire. He moved to Silver Plume, Colorado around 1969 or so, where he established himself as one of the locals. It was really just him and his dog Gus, though, when this case occurred. He wasn't one to, interact much with people. He did kind of keep to himself a lot, but he still was very friendly and, knew everyone, and everyone knew Tom. He opened up his own little bookstore there in town in a one-time vacant building, and it was, relatively successful as a tiny town bookstore could be. He made decent business, but this was all more about just sort of living that small town lifestyle. And that's kind of what most people who live there pretty much are looking for. They're looking to almost be secluded. And I think Tom Young really was that type of person. On September 7th, 1987, Tom would close up his bookstore like he did every day at the end of the day. And then, townsfolk would see him and Gus walking away from the bookstore. And that was it. That was the last time anyone ever saw Tom Young ever again, or his dog. And Tom quickly became kind of a local legend because, he was reported missing, and they searched for him, but they just could never find him. And one of the reasons why is because he had told people, I think he was going to be taking a very long vacation somewhere, and so people didn't truly realize he was missing for at least a couple of months. They just didn't know when he was really supposed to leave for that vacation, but they knew he was supposed to be gone. So after a few months goes by and he still hasn't come back, nobody has entered his bookstore, then they become suspicious and report him missing. Again, they search for him, but they find no trace of him. And really, his name kind of would go around town like folklore very quickly. What happened to Tom Young? Where did he go? Did someone kidnap him and his dog? Was he murdered? Did he fake his own disappearance? Where did he go? What happened? It became a lot of, great conversation, but no one really knew. About 9 months after Tom's official disappearance, in June of 1988, another stranger comes to town, a man named Keith Reinhard. Keith Reinhard was originally from Chicago, Illinois, and he was a sports writer out there. Some described it as he was going through a bit of a midlife crisis when he would end up finding himself in Silver Plume. Keith was a husband and a father to 2 adult children, but he seemed to be lacking a lot for himself. Like, he felt he was really lacking stuff. He felt like he hadn't accomplished enough. And he also felt, I still have plenty of time left on this earth to accomplish something. But he needed some way to clear his mind, somewhere to go to kind of reset. And so he talked to his wife for a very long period of time saying, listen, I think I need to do something on my own for a few months. I need to go somewhere quiet and peaceful, reflect, take in maybe a different culture or something. Like, I need to do something different kind of on my own. His wife would eventually say, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. And so it wasn't like a divorce, or they weren't separating. She was very understanding. He would end up picking up, and he found himself in Silver Plume, Colorado. Well, he noticed there was a vacant building there that used to be a bookstore, from what locals told him. And he purchased the building, or rented it out, and he was going to turn it into an antique shop. One of the reasons why he went to Silver Plume was because he actually knew someone who lived there, a man named Ted Parker. He and Ted were good friends. Ted owned a little cafe there in Silver Plume, and it was kind of like him that almost inspired Keith to go out there. Ted always told him how Silver Plume was a very quiet, peaceful place. Everything just seemed slow. There wasn't really any, issues here, no crime or anything like that. Keith decided that this was the best place because he also wanted to write a book. He wanted to move away from sports writing at some point and become, a published author. He also knew that this was an area that's going to be surrounded by mountains. It's nearby the Colorado Rockies. He had a fear of heights, and that's something he wanted to vanquish, that fear. And so he figured if he goes somewhere like that, where he could take up hiking, he could eventually work on that fear and maybe get rid of it. Plus, he wanted to be in better shape, and so he figured being in a climate like that where he could hike on a daily basis, maybe, he could definitely lose some weight and become healthier. The plan was to take a 3-month sabbatical from his sports writing job in Chicago to do this in Silver Plume. Now, when he opened up this shop, it's an antique shop, and again, a population of 150 to 200, he's not really making much business. And his business really does kind of flop almost right from the get-go. They don't really have a lot of tourists who come through either. But something he learned is that the previous owner of this exact same building, it was a bookstore prior, was a man named Tom Young. And they told him about the legend of Tom Young, who almost a year or so ago disappeared with his dog never to be seen again. That there was no trace of Tom ever found. And so Keith became wrapped up in this local folklore that was actually real. He, listened to people's rumors and gossip about what they think happened to Tom Young. And he very quickly became obsessed with the story of Tom Young. And he said, oh my God, this is the perfect story to tell for a book. This was his novel now. He was going to be writing a fictional story centered around a man who disappears in this tiny little town, and it was going to be inspired by Tom Young. That was not going to be the character's name, it was just more of an inspiration. But he started doing a lot of research into Tom. He would find newspaper clippings, and he would look up anything he could about Tom's case. He almost became not so much obsessive, but very investigative. He would talk to townspeople about who he was as a person and what they think might have happened to him, and did he have any enemies? Did anyone want to harm him? And he was just really looking into his story. But eventually, when his antique business was starting to become a flop, and it weighed on him very heavily, and it created a lot of, obviously, mental stress, and he then had writer's block. He was having a really hard time, moving forward with writing this book. But he felt there was still, there's still a hope. There's still a way that I can reconcile all of this. He still had time on his 3-month sabbatical. On July 31st, 1988, a couple of hikers are hiking in the nearby wilderness, which is and they were about 1.5 miles or so away from town. But given where it was actually about an hour hike from the center of town because of the area. Well, these two hikers, deep in these woods, found a skeleton, basically lying next to a tree, and it looked like a human. And then a few feet away, they see another skeleton. This looks like an animal, possibly a dog. And they find a gun. They're located in the middle of this scene. There's also this green tarp that was that was basically in the same scene. Now they contact the sheriff's department, which is the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department. They go out to investigate, and again, they see what the hikers see. They confirm that this is a human body and this is the body of a dog. And there was a gun. The gun was fairly rusted over, and these remains were not going to be identifiable by looks, so it would take dental records, and eventually they were able to confirm that the body they found was that of Tom Young, and then the dog was his dog, Gus. Each one of them had suffered a single gunshot wound to their heads. So Gus the dog was shot in his head, as well as Tom. Police looked at it and said, oh, okay, this is easy peasy. He put the gun to his dog's head, killed him, and then he took his own life. Done. It was very strange, though, to locals who knew Tom, who said Tom never gave any indication that he was, depressed or that he ever was going to, contemplate taking his own life. It doesn't mean he wasn't capable of doing it, or he wasn't depressed, or he wasn't thinking along those lines. It's just that people there never saw the signs. What the townspeople also knew is that Tom loved his dog, Gus. Gus was his best friend. There was no questions. Tom would never hurt his dog, ever. There were no indications that the dog had any broken bones or anything that would indicate, well, maybe Gus got hurt really bad, that wasn't going to be savable, and so Tom shot him. There was nothing to suggest that. And this idea that Tom would have shot and killed his own dog, his best friend, it just didn't fly with people. However, what the sheriff's department could not do was they could not say that that was the actual weapon that was used to kill Tom and his dog. They could not confirm through ballistics that it was the same gun. And that was a red flag to the townspeople. But again, to the sheriff's department, this was, no, the only explanation here is that he did it to himself. That's it. And of course, this is happening as Keith Reinhard is trying to get out of his writer's block with this story he's writing. Well, a week after Tom and Gus are found, Keith does something strange. It's now August 7th, 1988. Keith Reinhard leaves his shop, locks the door, and begins to walk away from the shop. Now, this day, he did tell people he was planning to do a hike. He was telling people that he planned to be climbing Pendleton Mountain, which is not an easy hike. It's difficult, especially for someone who has very little experience with it. And none of the townspeople took him seriously because every single one of them knew that Keith was terrified of heights and that this was not the ideal place to hike for someone who was scared of heights. At about 4 p.m., he goes to his friend's store, his cafe. He told Ted, hey, I'm going to be hiking this mountain. If I do not come back by later tonight, call in for a search because, you need to find me. Ted looked at his friend and kind of just laughed it off like, oh, okay, Keith, yeah, you're going to go hiking there. So Keith is seen walking towards the direction of Pendleton Mountain at 4:30 p.m. Keith has nothing with him. He has no backpack. He has no gear. He's wearing a flannel and a pair of jeans. Keith walked into those mountains and he never came back. Once again, within a year span, a man walks towards the mountains and never comes home. A man who worked in the exact same building as the previous person who disappeared. Disappears under the exact same circumstances, in virtually the exact same area. This is strange. This, in a small town like this, with a tiny, tiny population, could not possibly happen more than once. But it did. By the following day, Ted noticed that Keith was not anywhere to be seen, couldn't find him, and so, oh my god, Keith was serious. He was going to be going to this mountain. So they call in for help, and eventually they bring in about 125 to 150 people or so for search and rescue. Some of the locals who are experienced at hiking, they go out there looking as well. They are searching as much of this mountain as they could possibly do that was feasible, that they could realistically get to and safely. Then the people who had the experience of hiking and climbing, who had the gear, would also hike the mountain to see if they can find Keith anywhere. They bring in search dogs to try to pick up his scent. They're searching on land. They have people in vehicles searching kind of in the lower areas. They also have people in planes. They are searching from above. This is a very, very extensive search, one of the largest searches that they have ever done in this portion of Colorado. The problem is in this particular area, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's very difficult. Not to mention that Keith was not wearing any bright clothing. He wasn't carrying any backpack, no gear, nothing that could, help find him easy. Sadly, as they are searching, one of the planes that was in the air, something happens where it crashes into the wilderness below. And one man is seriously injured, and the other man in the plane, there was 2 people in it, died. And at that point, they decided it's time to call off the search. Now, as they were searching for Keith, people also went into his shop to see if they could find anything. They didn't really find anything. They then go into, the little place where he's living, and they see that his computer is still up, that it's basically, he's still in the process of writing this book. There are several newspapers next to his computer. He has all this information about Tom's disappearance. He has things circled and highlighted. It looked like he was investigating this. Even after his body was found, he was really looking into what happened to Tom, what really happened to Tom. Because again, a lot of people didn't believe the story that Tom did this to himself. Most people believed, other than the sheriff's department, of course, that Tom Young met with foul play. One of the reasons why is because, again, the gun could not be conclusively determined to be the gun that killed him and the dog. There was also this green tarp that had been completely, I guess at one point, laid out. And no one really knew why Tom would have had this large green tarp, because they didn't really think he was going to be camping out in the mountains. I mean, again, they didn't really know he was even out there to begin with, but it was just a strange thing. This tarp was laid out, and what that told a lot of townspeople, and it looked like what kind of Keith was also zoning in on, is that the tarp indicated that someone was trying to conceal these 2 bodies, the body of this man and this dog. But again, over the course of time, through natural occurrences, wildlife, that tarp likely got kind of moved away. But opened on Keith's computer was a little segment that he was writing the book, and it said this, so quote, "Guy Gypsum changed into some hiking boots and donned a heavy flannel shirt. He understood it all now, and his motivations. Guy closed the door and then walked off towards the lush, shadowless Colorado forests above," end quote. And that was the last thing he wrote before he vanished. Guy Gypsum was the character that he named. The way he describes it is very similar to the way he himself disappeared, wearing a flannel shirt, walking towards the Colorado forests, and then vanishing. And so now several people are like, wait a minute. Was he writing about his own future disappearance? Was he setting up a mystery for people to solve? Was this done on purpose? Was this particular passage left open for people to see for a reason? Because Keith was going to make himself disappear. Maybe not die, but disappear. And this would be like a clue. Once his wife and his children find out about this, they all tell, that, there's no, Keith, he wouldn't have done this. He would not have gone out there without any gear or anything to hike this particular mountain without any training, unless something made him go out there. Not to mention the fact that his wife would tell police that Keith had talked to the editors at the Herald newspaper in Chicago, where he had, came from, and he called them a week prior to his disappearance and said, "Hey, listen, I would really love to be able to cover the Chicago Bulls when I come back to Chicago. That's something I really, really want to do." And he was very serious about it. And this would indicate to people that he planned on coming back to Chicago. He had plans of a future. And so, okay, maybe what happened to Keith was just simply an accident. Maybe he was careless. He went out there thinking he can do it without any gear, or the proper clothing or attire, proper shoes. He was just wearing sneakers, and he just, he bit off more than he could chew, and he fell somewhere. They also found out that the night before his disappearance, Keith Reinhard was at a party there locally, and he was seen talking to a woman, and they only knew this woman's name was possibly Greta or maybe Gretchen. No one really knew her. No one really recognized her. but they believe that she was talking about being originally from Denver. Keith appeared to be hitting it off with this woman that no one knew. So there was this sort of belief that, okay, did he somehow fall in love with this woman? Did he know her prior to this conversation he was seen having with her? And did he orchestrate this entire thing to make it look like he vanished into the mountains and you'll never find him because he fell somewhere, but really he ran off with this woman? Well, I mean, the fact that his bank account's never been used, his social security number has never been used, and he has never been spotted by literally anyone ever since would kind of tell people that that's probably not what happened. He didn't run off with a woman, but it was a theory they threw out there. The sheriff's department looking into this, they looked at all of this research Keith was doing into Tom. Possibly as a writer, he is trying to become the character within the book, and that he wanted to feel what the character is feeling. He wanted to know what the character was experiencing. And in order to do that, he needed to have that experience. Live this character's life, just without the dying part. And again, that could lead into, he went out there for like research purposes to get into the mindset of Tom Young, and he just accidentally fell somewhere and died. There is another theory in that both Keith and Tom met with foul play. Now, Keith's children thinks he met with foul play. Most people feel he met with foul play. The sheriff's department does not believe that, but they also don't know for sure because Keith hasn't been found. Well, the crazy coincidences of all of this is that, Tom and Keith both worked in that exact same building. They occupied the exact same space. Was there something within that building that both Tom and Keith were not supposed to find? But they found it, and then someone found out they found it, and they both had to be killed. Now, if that was the case, that would mean that someone locally did this to both men. This was not something that someone from outside of Silver Plume is going to have any knowledge of. They have no business in this little town, so it had to have been one of these 200-ish people. Normally that's a lot of suspects, but in this case, when it's literally everyone who lives there, it could be easy to kind of weed people out. Something I thought of was that Keith was working in this building. He was researching Tom. He had newspaper clippings with things highlighted and circled, and he was really investigating Tom's disappearance even after his body was found. He still was really prying into this. So my thought is it possible that someone found out how extensively Keith was looking into Tom's case? That Keith may have found something information-wise that would have pointed to a possible culprit, a killer. And did someone locally, who may have done whatever they may have done to Tom and his dog, give Keith a call and say, hey, I have information that you need to know about Tom. I can't tell you over the phone. I need you to meet me in this spot at this time and don't tell anyone. And then Keith, curious, wanting this information for his book and possibly for the police, maybe met this person. And then Keith was killed because he was lured into a trap because Keith knew too much about Tom's disappearance. That would explain why he was telling everyone he was hiking near this mountain, but didn't go into much more detail. It would also explain why he was wearing nothing but just normal street clothes. He was not prepared for a hike on this kind of mountain. Someone like Keith, who was very intelligent, who had a fear of heights, who was not a hiker, would know better than to just do this without preparation, which could indicate he was going towards that direction. He was told to meet someone in that area, and that, hey, I'm going to tell my friend, if I'm not back by tonight, put out a search and rescue for me, because maybe Keith was concerned, but he couldn't say anything. And then Keith met with an untimely, horrific ending. That's just something I thought about as I was looking into this. I'm like, that is a possibility, but it is just a theory. It is not based on any factual information, just simply from my experience of talking about true crime cases for, years now. It's just something, that's a possibility. But the sheriff's department says Tom ended his own life. He killed his dog for reasons unknown, because no one knows why he did that. No one knows what led him to do that. Many people still think Tom was killed. Many people think Keith was killed. The circumstances of both men's disappearance is so crazy coincidental that it's almost impossible to believe that both men died just simply by accident or ended their own lives. And the fact that Keith has never been found, even after this incredibly thorough search, and just the years and the decades since of people hiking that exact same area, people out of curiosity will go and look. Not a single bone has been found. Nothing. Not a single trace. 2 hikers stumbled across Tom's body after a year in the depth, the very depth of these woods that not many people go to. They were still found. So how has Keith not been found? Well, it's a mystery. Ultimately, there are no suspects. Keith's case is still considered open. It is a cold case. They have not said that they believe Keith ended his own life. I think what they're trying to suggest from the police standpoint is Keith likely died accidentally. They just can't find him. Wildlife may have gotten to him and just kind of picked his body apart over the years. It's possible, but it's just so crazy coincidental that both men within a year who occupied the same shop disappeared under the exact same circumstances virtually and from the exact same area. That's just so weird. Did it have anything to do with the shop? Did it have anything to do with Tom? And then Keith, looking into Tom, found out too much. Ultimately, the town of Silver Plume moved on, and it's more just local legend. It's local lore. Stories that the townsfolk will tell people and visitors, I'm sure, every chance they can get. But these aren't just stories. This is real life. These are 2 real people who really disappeared. One found dead, the other not. And it's very possible that someone did it to both men. It's also possible that no foul play was involved. But that won't stop the curious mind from looking into this. That won't stop the stories being told. And ultimately, in the end, what really happened to Tom Young and what really happened to Keith Reinhard might just remain a mystery forever. But that is it for this case, True Crime, a Rooney, Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here on YouTube, obviously. So please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. You're a bunch of cuckoo wackadoos like the rest of us. Hit the bell so you're notified when I post new videos. Drop a like, leave a comment, so that way more people can see the video. I also tell short form true crime stories over on TikTok. You can find the link to my TikTok page in the description of this video below. It's in the link tree, so feel free to follow that if you like. I do post compilation videos here on YouTube, though, at the beginning of each month from all of the previous month's TikTok videos, so you can always wait for those as well if you want. Also in that link tree, you'll find my case list, which is over 7,500 names long. If there's a case that you do not see on there, it's alphabetical for the most part, and you don't see anything on there, just send me a quick email. My email is also listed below. All I need to know is the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add that case to my list. And I pick cases at random, so I can't promise you and I'll cover that case. However, if you are a loved one to a missing or murdered person and you want their story told, it's a cold case, unsolved, whatever the case may be, let me know that you are a family member and I can make sure that case gets a top priority. But that being said, that is the end of this video. So until the next case, True Crime Maroonies, ta-ta for now. Yeah. No.